Why are some photographs so compelling and others just average at best? Have you considered selling your work? Or maybe you have and no one's buying. Is there something you're missing? Well, today we're going to discover 5 things that make you an artist and not just a photographer. And maybe you might just learn a thing or two that may help you sell a few images along the way. Let's get to it. Whether or not you sell your work, it has nothing to do with being an artist. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very satisfying when someone buys your work. I didn't have many sales to speak of until I stopped taking photographs and started making them. Whether stock images or fine art photos, markets are flooded with mundane images. With a fixed amount of wall space, sales are limited to only the most unique works of art. But it's not selling photos that defines one as an artist, but rather the process in which one's work is created. To sell photos, you have to think like an artist, not a photographer. On that note, near the end of the video, I'm going to share some related information about Vincent van Gogh that may surprise you. Anyway, I don't want to make this about gear, but when a vision is prioritized over the camera and the gear, that's when things start to come together. And sales will follow. Which leads me to the first thing on my list. An artist has a vision. Indeed, the vision takes place well before the camera is ever picked up. This is probably the number one thing that separates a photographer from an artist. According to my Merriam-Webster's dictionary app, photographer is simply defined as one who practices photography. It goes on to read, especially one who makes a business of taking photographs. Whereas an artist has a much more robust definition. In summary, it defines an artist as a person who creates art, one who uses conscious skill and creative imagination. To be thorough, I ordered an updated dictionary from Amazon. It's pretty much the same thing, but it does define an artist as one who practices an art, especially one who creates objects of beauty. So, a photographer takes pictures and an artist creates beautiful objects. On the surface, the difference between a photographer and an artist seems simple, but in today's world, everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. Are they considered photographers? By Merriam-Webster's definition, yes, but here's where it gets interesting. Indeed, one can be an artist but not a photographer. Conversely, one can be a photographer but not an artist. So where does that leave you? When you approach a potential, let's just say an award-winning composition, is your first thought to grab the camera and take the shot? Or do you find yourself pre-visualizing the shot in the mind's eye, then grabbing the camera? An artist is a planner, a thinker. Anyone can whip out a smartphone and kind of snap the shot. At the risk of sounding a bit pretentious, let's just be honest. There's no art in snapping a photo to record an event, whether it's a $15,000 Hasselblad or a smartphone. But before you slam me in the comments, consider these 2 scenarios. In scenario 1, while at little Johnny's football game, out of nowhere, bam, interception. Dad quickly realizes the ball is in little Johnny's hands. He drops his hot dog, jumps to his feet, fumbles around, searching his pockets, and pulls out his smartphone. He rapidly fires the shutter until little Johnny brings it in for the touchdown. On the other hand, in scenario 2, little Johnny's Uncle Bill is also at the game. But unlike Dad, Uncle Bill's sporting a Canon EOS R1 coupled with his trusty 100 to 300 zoom. The family often makes fun of Bill's excessively long lens, but Bill's a serious hobbyist. Indeed, he's been planning and hoping that one day he would be in the right place at the right time. Having pre-visualized the shot, he knew that a fast shutter and aperture were essential. With a keen eye on the ball, Bill sees the moment unfolding. And from the vantage point he'd secured a couple hours earlier before the game, Bill brings his vision to life, the way he saw it, in the mind's eye. There's no doubt about it. Like many people, Dad's smartphone makes him an instant photographer. However, Bill arrived prepared, not only with the right tools, but with a vision. And it's not the expensive gear that makes Bill an artist. It's the vision, the foresight, the planning. These are the things that make you an artist and not just a photographer. When I hear someone suggest that photography is not art, well, they may be right in some cases, but clearly not all. I may not have a degree from Yale's School of Art, but I do have years of experience behind the lens. And I'd like to think I have a healthy dose of common sense. Indeed, I don't think a refined academic pedigree is a prerequisite for defining an artist. Number 2, you know the rules, but sometimes break them. An artistic photographer knows the rules. The typical smartphone photographer doesn't concern themselves with such things. Just ask the average person about the exposure triangle. It's not that an artistic photographer is any better than anybody else. It's just that they've invested the time to learn the ins and outs of photography in order to make the tools work for a specific outcome. An artist understands the rules to provide structure and focus to specific areas of a composition. Understanding the rules helps an artist to know when to push the limits of a rule or when to break them altogether. These things are not done by accident, but with artistic intent. For example, in this image, the rule of thirds would not favor centering the horizon, but would instead prefer placing it on an upper third or lower third line, as in this image. Often, artistic expression may dictate otherwise, and for good reason. With the reflections in this image, I used the leading lines in the clouds to draw the viewer's eye. Also, a firm grasp of the rule of thirds allowed me to consider the foreground, placing it slightly off to the left, more in the left third of the image, helping me to bring balance to the composition. I obviously didn't place the horizon on the third line, but it's also not exactly in the center, just slightly off center. Indeed, when reflecting back on this moment, I remember standing there thinking, how would this composition look in print? As if I were standing in my living room, viewing it on the wall. And then I thought, what do I need to do to ensure that when I'm at home viewing this print, it brings back the feeling of being present in this moment? I know that probably sounds more like a warped reality scene from a Doctor Strange movie. The point is, knowing the rules, it allows the artist to consider the entire scene and make creative decisions with forethought. Number 3, you've conquered your camera. Maybe you've even read your camera's instruction manual. Well, let's not go that far. But you're not battling your camera while in the field, fumbling around trying to figure out how to adjust the ISO or some other setting. An artist understands the capabilities and limitations of their equipment. This is critical to achieve a desired outcome, such as a certain depth of field. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm also a photographer. In fact, I would certainly say that I was a photographer before I considered myself an artist. But like many people, I began to critique my images and question my actions and thought. And once I started to pre-visualize the image, I began to center my photography around an idea rather than around a camera. It's so easy to get lost in the tech and forget about the most important aspect of being artistic, and that's creating something unique. You've likely heard the debate between the technical and creative photographer. I think it's just as important to be a technical photographer, certainly in the same sense as it is for a surgeon to be a technical surgeon. I heard a famous photographer once say, "I'm so not a technical photographer." I get it. The focus should be on art. But imagine, moments before being anesthetized, your surgeon says, "I'm so not a technical surgeon, but don't worry, this is going to go beautifully." Very comforting indeed. Everywhere you go, people say the same thing. Take your camera off auto and switch to manual. It's not that manual's any better. The point is to learn the camera and its capabilities so you can unleash your creative talents. Number 4, you paint with light, not a brush. Almost every serious photographer knows that light is the most important element in any composition. Too much light and everything's blown out. Too little light and there's nothing left to see. Indeed, light is a balancing act. Although a photographer may not use a brush to paint light, except in Lightroom or Photoshop, but I digress. But anyway, they do use things like time of day, year, location, camera angles, and above all, a healthy dose of patience. An artistic photographer evaluates not only the quantity, but also the quality of light. Look, let's be clear. I'm not trying to upset anybody, but there's a fundamental difference between a typical photographer, or let's just say an average person with a smartphone, versus an artistic photographer. I often use my smartphone to record the moment. For me, these are usually family events, and the iPhone is extremely handy. When I want to be creative and make something unique, not only do I use different equipment, but I have an entirely different approach. Not that there's anything wrong with using a smartphone. The current technology is amazing. In fact, I made a video comparing a smartphone to a professional camera. Depending on one's artistic vision, a smartphone, a mirrorless camera, or a DSLR can get the job done. As I mentioned earlier, it's the vision that separates a photographer from an artist. As opposed to the average person taking a selfie of a beautiful hillside at midday, not that there's anything wrong with that. An artistic-oriented landscape photographer will often arrive hours before sunrise, allowing plenty of time to iron out the details in the composition and wait. And maybe wait some more. Wait for the right light to fall in the right area at the right moment. It's planning and foresight that separate the photographer from the artist. Both have a camera, but the artistic photographer has a vision and a plan. It's the mastery of light combined with the patience to use it, as if it were a brush on a canvas. That's the difference. Number 5, you critique your work. Like it or not, the smartphone has transformed almost every person on the planet into an instant photographer. I made a video a little while back about 35mm film versus digital photography. I talked about how film cameras slowed us down. Although film cameras are quite simple compared to a smartphone, they do require a basic understanding of the exposure triangle. This, along with the limited number of frames per roll, makes one more conscious of the composition. Many of today's photographers never look back or beyond the images that they're currently creating. Our critique of past work can result in major improvements to future endeavors. An artist is always looking to improve their skills as well as their composition. That's the part that makes you an artist and not merely a photographer. It's the fact that you do critique your work. You're critical of yourself. Indeed, you are your own worst critic. And while we're on the subject of critics, what about critiques from others? In my humble opinion, critiques from others are certainly noteworthy, but they should be taken with a grain of salt. Show the average person a beautiful landscape painted on a canvas, and they'll likely say, "That's amazing. You're so talented. Oh my goodness, how long have you been an artist?" On the other hand, show them a beautiful landscape photograph in print, and they'll likely say, "That's beautiful. Where was that taken? Oh my gosh." Then they may also ask, "Is that yours? Did you take that?" See the difference? Subconsciously, people verbalize hidden thoughts. I mean, why does a painted canvas seem more like art versus a photograph? Subconsciously, people attribute more effort to the painting versus the act of taking a photograph. One is perceived as making, the other is taking. Intuitively, the average person understands the amount of work involved in painting a canvas, but they have no idea how much skill and time went into making that photograph, not taking it. The assumption is that painting a canvas requires skill. I mean, after all, it was made with years of experience, or perhaps the painter has a natural-born talent, unlike pointing a camera at a hillside, right? How many times have you heard, "Wow, nice camera. I'll bet that takes great photos," like the camera does all the work, right? I wouldn't spend time trying to convince anyone of the merits of an artistic photographer being equal to a canvas painting artist. Certainly not to anyone outside the photography community, but it's something we should be aware of when others are critiquing our work. I try to keep in mind it's not the hard work and effort that define my photography. It's the creativity and the desire to do better next time. One of the questions I most often ask is, how many times are you going to go back to the same location? Don't you want to photograph new things? Well, of course, but I want to get this one right first. And it might just take a dozen return trips. Indeed, as an artist and a photographer, it's important to see things from the perspective of others. In a metaphorical sense, the moment I traded my camera for a painter's palette, it changed the way I see my photography. Yes, an artist is always seeking improvement and is critical of their work. I've often thought about the most impactful critique of all, at least for me, the one that carries the most weight. And it's my own honest, unbiased assessment. However, a close second to my own critique is when I hear these words, "I want that photo in my living room." That's music to my ears. Earlier, I'd mentioned Vincent van Gogh. According to the History Press, out of 900 paintings and more than 1,000 drawings, he only sold 2 paintings and a handful of drawings in his entire lifetime. Remember, don't focus on selling as a measurement of your artistic success. Like Van Gogh, you may be waiting a long time. But thinking like an artist and not just a photographer, well, that's going to lead to more sales. And that's certainly been true in my experience. As an artist, I want to use my skill and talent to create unique photographs that reflect my vision, the way I see the world. On that note, if you want to level up your game a bit more, watch this video right here. See you on the trail.